Well, we've made it to our final listening video of the year. You may have noticed sort of a recurring theme as we've taken a look at some of the masterpieces of Western music. Basically, the past few centuries of Western music have been about establishing traditions and then surprising audiences by breaking certain traditions. So in the classical period, when composers like Mozart were introducing techniques like sonata form, it was nice because it made everything sound neat and organized. It was also nice later on because audiences had gotten used to that sound, and so that meant you could start messing with it to surprise the audience and grab their attention. And likewise, composers like Berlioz could take the simple traditions of program music and then tweak them and exaggerate them to create something dramatic and unexpected. So the history of music is kind of like if your parents had you eat a lot of macaroni and cheese as you were growing up, which is good, but then you get kind of tired of it, so then they put ketchup on it. And at first you're like, what? You can't do that. But then you find out it actually kind of works. Another example might be pizza and ranch dressing, or carrots and shoes. Hey, you never know. I mean, you only live once, right? Wait, do we live more than once? Is there another one after this? Or is that it? Sorry, I just forgot. Oh well. Well, now let's look at possibly the most famous example of ketchup. Or I guess I should say music that broke traditions and startled audiences. The Rite of Spring by Igor Stravinsky. It was a ballet written for a well-known Russian ballet company directed by the famous Sergei Diaghilev and choreographed by the famous Vaslav Nijinsky, and it premiered in Paris.
Mesdames, Messieurs, welcome to the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées. It was right here in this theater that one of the most famous opening night scandals in the history of all performing arts took place, the premiere of the Rite of Spring.
Stravinsky threw some very new, unusual sounds into the Rite of Spring, and the audience thought it was just too much. They thought he put too much ketchup on the macaroni, and people in the audience started laughing and booing. Now back then, it wasn't that unusual for audiences to show their reactions, but this was pretty excessive. And then actually later in the century, people began to appreciate it and understand it, and it had a huge influence on later music. But it definitely wasn't very popular at first.
So what could he do as he listened to that Paris audience making a kind of roar, a kind of class warfare? It was too much. He panicked. He knew he had to intervene. He got up and went backstage. Now, by the time Stravinsky reached this spot in the wings, things were in a state of complete chaos. But the performance was continuing. What Stravinsky didn't know is that Diaghilev had instructed the conductor, Pierre Monteux, to keep going no matter what would happen. So Diaghilev may have expected there'd be some kind of ruckus at the performance. But back here, the situation was that the audience was making so much noise that the dancers could not hear the music. They couldn't stay in sync. So just imagine, right on this spot, Nijinsky climbs up this chair. He leans out so far, Stravinsky has to grab him by his coattails to keep him from falling over. And amidst the huge racket, he's yelling, 18, 19, 20, 21.
Now there are many different kinds of art, and while some art is intended to be abstract and transport us to another world, there's also art on the other end of the spectrum that wants to keep us in this world. It's more clear and natural and focuses more on humans and the earth. That's called Primitivism, and that's what Stravinsky was thinking of in the Rite of Spring. He was like, let's just take some sounds from tribal songs and dances and throw them into a piece for orchestra, and I don't care if they don't follow normal orchestral traditions of harmony or form or rhythm. So the material he was using was very simple, just primitive sounds that get repeated a lot, like the melody from an old folk song or the drum beat from a dance, but it was how he used that material, how he organized it and adapted it for an orchestra that made it sound so unusual and new and exciting. The piece is in two parts, and we'll do a quick overview before each part, looking at how he managed to take primitive sounds and make them sound cool in an orchestra. Well shoot, this piece is a half-hour long, so we'll have to do the overview pretty fast here. Alright. Part 1 has 7 movements. Movement 1. So this piece is pretty massive. It requires a very large orchestra and it gets really chaotic at times, but it all starts with just one instrument. It's really neat when you see it live. 1 billion players are on stage, everyone's excited for it to start, and then you hear the soft sound coming from just one of those players somewhere on stage. Stravinsky took this melody from an old Lithuanian folk song.
Now, I'm singing it in a kind of shtick version of what Russian village music can sound like.
And in order to get that really weird kind of singing sound, Stravinsky put it in this really high register on the bassoon, and he added some grace notes to make it sound like the breaks in the voice. And then the English horn comes in, another weird kind of sound, singing its own melody, not really caring what key the bassoon was in. And then the rest of the introduction just has more weird solo instruments entering like that, singing their own unique tune. I think the best part is when the bass clarinet suddenly comes in. It sounds kind of like ba-da-ba-ba, kind of like that. So it's pretty weird and awesome. Then eventually we hear... What was that? There's finally a steady rhythm that's starting to form. And this is foreshadowing the next movement, which is where the music starts to get pretty messed up. What kind of chord is that? Well, it's this one. It's actually two very different chords at the same time. You got your E major chord, sounds fine. And up here you got your E flat 7, also sounds fine. You play them at the same time, doesn't sound fine. It's not a normal harmony, but it sounds really neat and it's got that rough sound to it. All over this movement, you hear short musical ideas just get repeated all over the place, not really changed or developed, but they might get passed to other instruments. It's a technique called ostinato, and Stravinsky helped make it extremely popular for future composers, especially minimalism. A big part of the energy in this music is all the repetition of these ideas, like a huge dance. New ostinatos get introduced and thrown around, and it builds up to the end of the movement, and then get ready for this. It's just, psh, bam, next movement, no fancy transition. Bam! See what I mean? There's sort of a new kind of chaos here. We don't have that steady rhythm anymore. There's some random violent strikes on the bass drum and timpani. It's really hard to tell what meter we're in. I mean, just look at the score. It's a mess. Who spilled these notes all over the place? Well, let's listen to those first three movements, and then we'll come back and talk about the next ones. Alright, let's go see the concert. Here we go. Well, I'm back to tell you about the next part. Things have finally calmed down a little bit, because everyone's so exhausted from dancing and they've all collapsed. And here's another cool primitive sound, this melody from the bass clarinet and high E-flat clarinet 2 octaves apart. And then the dancers regroup and go into this slower, darker kind of a dance.
It's got the downest, funkiest, ostinato rhythmic basis of anything we've heard thus far.
And then yet another weird sound. Listen to this melody from 4 solo violas and flutes. What is going on with the harmony? This. Well, you've got the first stand of violas playing this nice melody in thirds. Sounds nice, except the third chair viola is playing notes just a step below the second chair viola, so it sounds like this. It's got that kind of to it, like. But then the dissonance gets even more insane, and it builds up to this. Here are some of those notes. You might as well have just gone like this. Then we hear a more upbeat dance, where the different sections of the orchestra form their own tribes.
The dance itself showed patterns of dancers, teams of dancers. Very much the same way there are teams of instruments who play in the orchestra, and the alternation of these teams and the splitting up of these teams to form and reform is a major way that the piece keeps its excitement going. The strings who keep up the chunga 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 of the basic rhythm. The high trumpets and horns who call back and forth to one another. The woodwinds who chirp a happy tune. Now, sometimes these teams alternate, but sometimes the teams keep playing until they create a huge, big pileup of sound in which no one's willing to stop or give in to anyone else.
And it keeps building up to this huge conflict of sounds. The last dance ended with clashing harmony. This one ends with clashing harmony and rhythm. Ah! Then there's a bit of a pause and some strange sounds. Then suddenly everything explodes into the dance of the earth.
What's so amazing about this dance to the earth is that there really are no themes here. It's all just a bunch of rhythmic urges that have been set down into different parts of the orchestra.
It's really exciting.
And then still over that unifying ostinato, different teams come in with their own particular rhythm. The violas and the horns playing triplets. Trumpets and the violins playing quadruplets. Everything drives on, building and layering until it gets so crazy, it just can't be sustained. Party's over, blackout.
So now here's the rest of part 1. So that's part one. Part one was built around the idea of games and ritual dances preparing for spring. Part two takes place at night, and the young girls are playing mysterious games to find out who the chosen one is. Then the chosen one has to dance herself to death while the sages watch. The sages want to sacrifice her in order to please the god of spring. So part two is obviously a little darker. Stravinsky starts us off with this very eerie atmosphere in the introduction.
Part two is meant to be hypnotic, ritualistic, leading us into the mood which will allow the chosen maiden to ultimately sacrifice herself. It's this which is nearly continuous in the whole first part of this movement. It's harmonized this way, and made still even more amazing by the out there D minor harmony of the horns being added.
Then on top of that, Stravinsky adds a melody with the perfect combination of instruments for this mood: flute and harmonics on a violin. Genius. Wait, what was that? Ah, you see, Stravinsky's doing this thing again where you start with just a tiny fragment of an idea, and then it keeps coming back later, adding more notes each time, and then eventually you hear the complete idea. So first we get this. And then this, a few measures later. And that keeps coming back and adding to itself, so that by the last time we hear it, it's evolved into this. It's like putting a puzzle together and having no idea what the final picture is until you get there. That's an unusual musical form called teleological genesis. Most orchestra music is like sonata form, where you see the full picture at the beginning, and then you take it apart and look at the different pieces of it, and then put it all back together in the end. Alright, so all this time, they've been playing these mysterious games and walking in a circle to reveal who the chosen one is. When they find out, it gets really intense. Just imagine you're in a circle with some other people, and you all know that one of you has to die, and then you find out, and the mood suddenly changes.
The brass take us back to those throbbing chords of the very first dance of the piece, made much more violent by the presence of very loud percussion, suggesting death, 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 death.
And it's as loud as we can play, 11 notes in a row, with no other intent but to be scary.
This is another one of those spots where there's no melody or theme, just a bunch of different sounds combined into different patterns, like ow. Then there's a bit of an interruption to all this chaos when the girls invoke the ancestors. There are 5 old village elders who arrive to call on the gods and witness the girls' sacrifice. And even though there's a pause in the dancing, you still feel the tension and anticipation with that low, dissonant bass note. And then we just wait for the chosen one to start dancing herself to death. The other girls and the sages dance around her in the meantime, and it calms down a bit, but we all know something big's about to happen. She could start dancing any second now. And then, bam! The sacrificial dance. All the jagged rhythms make it sound like it's not a very pleasant dance. And how did he manage to notate all those weird rhythms and sounds? Well, he actually had a lot of trouble notating it at first, but eventually he decided to break it down into these segments, which he could then arrange into different patterns.
Now listen in slow motion what they are. The simplest is just an alternating on-beat and snappy off-beat. But you notice that the double basses play the first downbeat, and the timpani plays the next downbeat, and that dialogue is what bumps it up. Let's do that once more. Now, the next part of it is a masterfully placed silence, followed by an exaggerated crescendo by brass instruments. There we go. And the last is 3 consecutive short notes played by strings and winds. So you got that? The first one is the second one is and the last one is And this pattern, which repeats many times, sometimes with a couple more bars, sometimes with a couple less bars, is what gives that inevitable but kind of wonderfully off-kilter feeling. And then comes a contrasting section, which, although quiet, is absolutely insistent in reaffirming the groove.
And it also ends up being one giant counting challenge for the orchestra, but it's kind of fun.
My piece of the puzzle is not to play where everybody else in the symphony orchestra is playing. For instance, if I were to play my part in the left hand and I'll play the orchestra's part in my right hand, you'll see what I mean.
There's no way anyone could dance to these rhythms, unless you're killing yourself trying to do it, so I guess it kind of works in this case. This goes on for a while, and then the whole piece comes to an end very abruptly, right when she dies. So there you have it. Now you're about to hear the second half of the piece of music that caused all that rioting about 100 years ago in Paris, but then went on to inspire creativity in so many musicians for the rest of the century. Today's world is very different from the world of Stravinsky or Berlioz or Mozart, but I hope you found that with just a little understanding of music history, music from the past can be just as fascinating and fun to listen to today. I hope you've all enjoyed the videos this year. I hope you're enjoying music, and I hope you're enjoying life. Now let's listen to some music about death. Use more bow. Sand, which is sand.
Hi, Mr. Traffic.
Oh, hey there, Alexa. How's it going?
Mr. Traffic, guess what?
What?
Guess.
What?
Guess.
What?
Guess.
What?
You have to guess.
Mr. Traffic.
Aria, look what I drew for Mr. Traffic.
Stop! No one's allowed to draw on the whiteboard. Just get out of my life. Alright, so make sure you're all in your seats.
Hey, Mr. Dropkiss.
Tavin, you can't have food in here.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know.
Yeah, you should really remind us more often.
Yeah, put a sign on the auditorium door or something.
Come on.
Mr. Trapkis, where are all the chairs and stands?
They're probably in the band room. Just go get them from the band room. Or they might be right in front of you. Dakota, can you put the stand down? Each of those is $50.
I'm not tardy, I'm in my seat.
No, it has to be your seat.
I'm in my seat.
No, that doesn't count.
I'm in my seat.
No, you really aren't. Seconds, the seating should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, yeah, it's just a little bit off right now. Trellis, did you check the list on the door to make sure you're all in the right seat?
What list?
I'll go check, and then we'll have to change our seats.
Okay, could you guys just check that as you're walking into the auditorium maybe next time? I think that'd probably make more sense.
Making us follow that list is like killing babies.
No, I really don't think it's that extreme. Alright, announcements. So most of these I already read and just forgot to check off. So hold on a second here. So don't forget about the combined rehearsal after school on Monday. I made a Vine. All state excerpts, have the all state excerpts here. Make sure you come to the combined rehearsal on Monday. And our concert is tomorrow. Make sure you're on stage in your seat by 6 o'clock. Then the concert starts at 7.
I can't make it. I have volleyball.
I have track.
I have sports.
I have Girl Scouts.
My dad's having a baby.
Okay, that's all right. I guess it's just music. It's not a big deal. Fiddle group Thursday. Combined rehearsal.
Sorry, Mr. Trapkis, I had to sleep in, but I have a pass, so it's all right. It's okay.
That doesn't make any sense. All right. So we got the combined rehearsal
It's a joke day.
Oh yeah, today's a joke day. I already told all the jokes in the world, so we're gonna have to start recycling some of them. All right, what do you get when you drop a piano down a mine shaft?
A flat minor.
And what movie is this from? Nice hat. What are you trying to look like? Secret agent. Jurassic Park. Very good. Take out the warm-up books. All right, take out our first piece. 5 little dances. Try to get it out quickly. We're just a little off schedule. Okay, good. Nice, strong opening sound. Great. Let's skip to letter D. All right. Yeah, I think it's still rushing just a little bit here, guys. Did you all write in something about heavy or don't rush?
Yeah, I wrote it in, and then I circled it, and then I highlighted it, and then I put a star next to the circle, and then I signed my name next to it.
All right, yeah, firsts and violence, just make sure we're not rushing there. We need to stay in the lower half of the bow. Hopefully you wrote something in there. Whoa, what'd you just take?
I lost my music.
Didn't you all make 5 extra copies last time?
Oh wait, I just lost the extras folder.
What?
I lost my cello.
How?
I lost my body.
Okay, anyway, first violins, you could play out a little more. I can't really hear the melody at D. Let's just hear the firsts at 29. Oh, that's right. I guess none of the firsts are here today. Maddie, class started about an hour and a half ago, so just try to get here on time next time.
Okay, sorry. And my dog ate my violins, so can I borrow a school one?
Yeah, that's fine. Just check locker 120, combinations 25, 35, 3. Actually, class is almost over, so don't worry about it. All right, we're a little off schedule, so it's time to go. All right, I'll see you all Wednesday. Bye.
Mr. Trapkiss, I'm telling you right now, I'm giving this cello to Emma because she uses it in the other orchestra. So I want you to watch me do it right now.
Yeah, okay, I guess it's okay. We just had some problems with cellos ending up in the wrong place, so yeah, just, that's all right, I guess. Just, okay.
Need this for you.
Oh, cool. Thanks, I guess.
Mr. Trapkiss, all the cellos are gone, so what should we do?
Dakota, could you go find all the cellos? Thanks.
I forgot my instrument. I thought it was Saturday.
What? Okay, just go to locker 120. The combination is... All right, let's take out the TV show medley, and we'll start from measure 82, getting into the Downton Abbey theme. All right.
Mr. Trapkiss, isn't it time to go? It's 10:15.
All right, so this part's pretty tricky. Just remember that the triplets become the new 8th notes. So we got that, violas? So just make sure we don't take it too fast either. So. Oh yeah, sorry Dakota, yeah, you can go now.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. All right, guys, the baton's up, so we'll start when everyone's instrument's up and ready to go. Yeah, so you'll need your instrument in playing position in order for us to start together.
Why aren't we starting?
Get your instruments up.
Oh, thanks, Brisa. Oh, sorry, the bell's gonna ring, so just make sure you put your chairs and stands back before you go. Don't leave until your whole section has their chair and stand back. Then you can go, okay? Okay, well, thanks, Eric. Oh, shoot, I have music tech in 0 minutes.